This episode is brought to you by Deep Sky Coffee. Head to jameswjesso.com/coffee and use the promo code JESSO to get 10% off your order and send 5% to psychedelic research. Hello everyone, welcome back to Adventures Through the Mind. I am your host, as always, James W. Jesso. This episode features a conversation between Francoise Bourzat and Dr. Rosalind Watts. Dr. Rosalind Watts is a clinical psychologist and serves as the clinical lead of the Imperial College London Psilocybin for Depression study. Her qualitative research indicates connectedness and acceptance as fundamental mechanisms of change in psilocybin therapy. She developed the Watts Connectedness Scale and a therapeutic framework for conducting preparation and integration sessions in psychedelic therapy trials, known as the ACE model: Accept, Connect, Embody. Rosalind has written about psychedelics as agents of connectedness and given several talks on the subject, including a popular TEDx talk. Francoise Bourzat holds a master's in somatic psychology from New College of California. She is a certified Hakomi therapist, and she is an adjunct faculty in the East-West Psychology program at the California Institute for Integral Studies. Since 1987, Francoise has apprenticed with shamans and healers in the U.S. and Mexico. In the last 20 years, she has traveled with groups to Mexico, incorporating her counseling practice experience with her knowledge of expanded states of consciousness, where she partners with Mazatec healers in sacred mushroom ceremonies. She is also the author of the book Consciousness Medicine, which showcases her decade-long knowledge bridging indigenous practices and Western psychology. I have these two women on the show to talk with each other. Not to be interviewed by me, but to chat with each other, to compare notes, to ask questions of each other. And this is because each of them are highly established, experienced, knowledgeable, and I would suggest wise into the complexity of psilocybin medicine. Francoise coming from primarily a long-term practice rooted in indigenous wisdom traditions, bridging with Western psychology, and Dr. Rosalind Watts, rooted in Western psychotherapy, evolved into scientific clinical research. So essentially, they've entered into psilocybin medicine in entirely different ways, and yet also in very interestingly overlapped ways, and they're both leaders in the field. So I thought it would be just really amazing to have them talk with each other and not be interviewed, but just talk with each other. In fact, I already have interviews with each of them, both Francoise and Rosalind separately, which you can check out in the links to the description, in the links contained in the description to this episode and at jameswjesso.com. It was recorded a few months back, kind of during the beginning of COVID, and I wasn't fully with it in a lot of ways. As like yourself, I was going through a lot. And so my audio recording is a little bit janky, and the audio recording in general is weird. There were like these gremlins that were just coming in and just creating weird glitches that we couldn't stop. We had to stop the call, start again, and then even move to a new platform because there was this weird grinding sound that just wouldn't go away. So that is part of the podcast too. You know, that is part of the lived moment of these things happening. And it's not particularly damaging to your earbuds or anything, your eardrums, but it can be distracting, so prepare yourself to allocate your attention appropriately when unnecessary sounds stream into your ears as you're trying to listen to conceptual information. Big thank you to Brock and Dana for the very generous PayPal donations, and to my patrons on Patreon who are the reason the show exists. They give monthly an amount of money, and that is the reliable income I can lean into to keep putting in the time and investing in the podcast. The people whose names are listed on the screen here on YouTube or in the description of this episode have given significantly or are giving significantly, so an extra thank you to them. If you're not a patron, please become one. jameswjesso.com/support, and you can link over to my Patreon. You could also leave a one-time PayPal donation. That's all for the intro. Please enjoy this conversation between Dr. Rosalind Watts and Francoise Bourzat here on Adventures Through the Mind. There's multiple reasons why I wanted both of you to come on the show and talk with each other. One of which is I respect both of you and your work quite deeply. And in particular, also, you're both psilocybin associated people, which is something that's very close to me. You're also both prominent women in the psychedelic field, which is not, well, it's a very male dominated space. And so I wanted to also have like two prominent women working on different sides of the psilocybin therapy sort of like, quote, divide, the underground and the overground. Although, Francoise, your work isn't entirely underground, it's fully legal and all the rest. But if you were to look at it from like a very simple generalization, like one happens in the university and one is shamanic underground therapy or something, right? So I wanted both of you to come in and just have your sort of perspective shared on the same questions, coming from different places, and to see where they complement, where they are, where they're kind of different, and then also to really lean into the two of you talking with each other, and asking each other questions and this kind of stuff, and sort of showcase for the listener something that doesn't happen in the public sphere very often, and you two have met previously, right? So you've gotten to have this with each other, but then to try to like capture brilliant minds talking with each other about psilocybin. So that's why this is happening right now.
Oh, that's so nice. It's a lovely idea. Really, really appreciate it. And Francoise, I've had your book, and it's like, I mean, it shocked me to realize actually this morning, and I thought actually, this has been like, I've had this book on my shelf and I've read great big chunks of it, but it's a real testament to how little time I've actually got, that I've had it for 6 months and still haven't actually managed to completely finish it. So I've loved the bits that I've read, but I have to say that there's still some more bits, but the bits I've read, I have been really, inspired by. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Rose. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Please.
I'm especially, I'm always happy to talk about psilocybin and the various angles of my interest and work and vision for the future and all. I mean, this is it's been my, there's more to my life than psilocybin, but this is a lot of my life, professionally and spiritually, I would say, even not just professionally as a job, but more like a path. But I'm especially happy today to talk to you, Rose, because I'm starting to be part of a team doing research with psilocybin and grief in Los Angeles.
Oh, wow.
So I am especially, this is like a brand new, like breaking the news, and so this place or position or collaboration in being a lead investigator in a research places me in a very different place, different, different capacity. And I'm looking very much forward to dialoguing with you because you've been in that field, that's where you are. And I'd love to hear what it's like to be a woman in that field. I mean, the three men I'm collaborating with are really wonderful people I know personally well. So there's two of them I know very personally well. So I feel very much with friends, not just with professional collaborator. But, that world is very foreign to me. And as a woman and as what are your thoughts and the pitfall and the, how to carve your signature, of care and more feminine energy into that field. Of course, they want me there because of my background and because of my expertise in training guides and a certain knowledge of psilocybin. So, but it's I haven't told anyone yet, so publicly, so.
That's
I'm looking forward to the discussion very much.
Yeah, so pleased to hear that. Look at using psilocybin for grief.
Yes.
Wow. And that's, I guess, really good. I mean, right now that's going to be, so that was a proposal and a project that was developed before the COVID was even imagined, I guess.
Yes, they're doing a study for alcoholism. Mm-hmm. So they're moving forward. They have all these FDA regulation thing that they're doing, of course, and so they're doing this project on alcoholism, and then they wanted very much to do a project on grief. It had been part of their projects ideas, and then I introduced one of the physicians to a palliative care doctor, a friend of mine in LA. With whom I'm organizing some retreats for bereaved parents in Jamaica. So we are organizing residential retreats for bereaved parents of his parents who have lost a child. And so this is all public and everything, and medically supported, and in collaboration with a Jamaican physician in Jamaica. Working actually on the psilocybin and palliative care project supported by the Beckley Foundation and Amanda Felding. Oh, yeah. So it's all the same group, which is wonderful. So anyway, I was going to do this with Chris, this physician. We are going to do this Jamaica bereavement retreat for parents. And the group in LA thought, well, we could do something on grief here that would be authorized and FDA approved, especially in the COVID time where people have complicated grief with the absence of completion with the family members and no funeral possible. So there's a very complicated, situation here. So we're trying to address the COVID situation, although it probably will expand to grief in general. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna try to be like pretty much as hands off as possible. So as I'm saying that now, so like as the conversation evolves, there's no need to wait for me to interject or guide the conversation. If you're talking about something, you want to ask each other questions, you want to get into something more deeply, don't wait for me to. There'll be moments where I'll be like, okay, let's move on to this question or blah, blah, blah. But otherwise, just like, please lean into the conversation. I know that, Francoise, you had offered one particular question there to Roz, which was around like being a woman in this field. And please tell me if this is not a fair sort of characterization of the question, which is like, do you have any tips or advice or hard-earned wisdom as to like how to pass through that as gracefully as possible?
Oh, yes. It's really not easy. It's been really hard. So my experience is based around comparing what it was like to be a woman psychologist in the National Health Service in the UK, and then joining psychedelic research as a psychologist. So, whilst I was working in the National Health Service as a woman, my experience was of, I guess, I didn't really ever think about the fact that I was a woman. I was one of the workforce of the National Health Service providing therapy, and I never really reflected on the fact that I was a woman because many of the people around me were also women. Most of my team, there would often be, in a multidisciplinary team, there'd be a few psychologists and psychiatrists and social workers and nurses, and it was a mix. And in the years I worked for the NHS, I found that I felt respected most of the time, supported, that we worked really well as a team. And the challenges I faced was talking therapy being time limited and poor resources and long waiting lists, things like that. But the people I worked with were always, I felt very, very well supported. And I wasn't particularly aware of my gender. And then when I joined psychedelic research, I have to say that did really change because the academia is a very, very different world to that more clinical world. There is a sense of competition. There is a sense of like the survival of the fittest. And it's a kind of dog-eat-dog world, I would say. And that really surprised me, and suddenly I became aware for the first time that I was a woman because I was in a world of men for the first time, really. And I think that the kind of stereotypical, like the gender stereotypes, have did play out most of the time, and and that there's nothing to do with individuals. I think it's just that the academic field is quite a masculine field, and it has been for a long time. And I struggled a lot with those values. However, because your question is really around like tips and kind of what happened was I was lucky enough, I think, I was given the freedom by my bosses, who trusted me enough and supported me enough to allow me to recruit my own team. And I recruited mostly women. So our gender balance became much more equal in our wider team. And in the team, we had in the Psilocybin for Depression team, we had 5 women and 1 man. And it was a very healthy team with a real sense of support and care. So I think what we really did is we brought the care in to a kind of setting that was more of the masculine academic setting. We kind of somehow managed to bring the care in, and that meant we developed our own kind of rituals around building a family. We built a family with each other, and we went out for lunches together sometimes. We tried to make it as informal and as loving. I have to use the word loving. It was a lot about love, because doing this research is, it's obviously, Francoise, this work, takes so much from you, and it can be so very intense. The support of your family around you to support you. So we used to do things where we developed lots of little kind of little things where we said that we would have, like, for this one just comes to mind, is we had a projection huddle, which was where when one of the guides in our team had been projected onto, that feeling where like you feel you've been part of a participant's strong process, and it's important that you've been there to play that role, but there's been a very strong projection as you as a cruel parent or lover or something that has felt really intense. You feel that you've been part of someone else's story, like drama, and you can feel that you hold that afterwards. And we would do this projection huddle where one of us would just like send on. We had a little team WhatsApp group, and we'd just say, like, I need a projection huddle. And we'd all just come together and just like have a big, it sounds so ridiculously cliched, a big hug, a cup of tea, and just like sit together and just, say, that was a projection, it's not you, just really kind of work through that stress. So I'd say that's a very long answer to your question, but really I'd say, to summarize it, I'd say you have to create the structures. As a woman, I found that I had to kind of try to create the structures of care in a system that didn't have them already, to build it ourselves.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, I can imagine how that transition was for you. It sounded like you really did well with creating a family and a culture, almost like a different culture, which probably affected the men too, right? To have this flavor of care, even though it was amongst the women maybe, but it was also probably permeating the masculine level of things, right? And your team, I know Robin a bit, but the other gentleman was also kind of nice. The immediate people around you are quite lovely, and young parents, and they're not exactly hardcore.
Yeah, no, I'm very lucky in that. I'm very lucky in being part of such a lovely team. Yeah. But I guess, more broadly, the kind of the widespread structures of academia, which is essentially a kind of masculine paradigm, and just the way the whole thing is up, and also the wider structures around us, like the kind of institutional structures and things like that. It's not set up for touchy-feely practices. Right.
Well, I have a feeling that these physicians want me there because I have a skill in the matter, of course, but also because I'm a woman and I'm an older woman, so I can bring a different, a different touch of care and wisdom and gentleness, that they might not have because they are a physician and they are caught in the medical model so much. So, like that. And I think that there is a genuine interest, which is, which touches me. There's a genuine interest in bringing in the medical field the lineage that I really represent. I mean, my narrative is around the tradition and the place where this psilocybin comes from, and the people and the land, and I don't know, the knowledge of the, almost like we could say, the vibration of it. We could say, the fact that I've been so immersed into that tradition that I can bring that flavor into what I'm doing. It's not so much what I say, but kind of who I am, in essentially. So I think they really want that. They really want to be grounded in a different thing beside the research in the lab and the measurement and like that, the results. Plus we're dealing with grief. I mean, depression is, heavy enough, of course, and grief. People losing loved ones. I mean, that's another territory that they really want to be cautious with, and they really want to go sensitive on it, which I appreciate. I appreciate that they have that angle right from the get-go. So, I mean, yeah. Again, I think I'll see as I am in there what are the moment to moment, I don't know, struggle or challenges or invitations. I'll see as I get along the project. But and the advantage is, like, I can make my team. The guides will be guides I choose, because amongst the guides I've trained over many, many years, I mean, I have physicians, I have doctorate people, psychologists, licensed therapists. I mean, I have a wide collection of people that have followed my training. So they're in my culture, they're in my large family. So I'm bringing these people to be the investigators, to be the lead therapist. And so, so there's a nice culture that is already established in there. Yeah. So I feel like I feel optimistic, but I'm listening carefully to your comments, because I don't know. Essentially, I'm imagining it's going to be great, but I don't know. So.
Oh no! Can you hear? Is that a plane? A plane? It's a plane. I'm so sorry. I thought we had no more planes anymore. Hear that, James? Is it really loud?
I think it's fine, and it's transient.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
we have.
Yeah. Oh.
So I'm gonna actually, Roz, if you want to comment on that, please do. But I feel like I want to interject with a specific question.
I want to say one thing, just based on that. Yep. And I was just going to say that, yeah, I think time is really moving on, and I hope that the fact that you've been invited from this team, and that they're specifically wanting what you're bringing, that vibration, that team, those people, I think it makes me very happy. It is a sign that things really are changing. And I think that we are seeing a rebalancing in the psychedelic research community. I think we'll see more and more women in these positions, and more recognition that, that the scientific research that's been done is amazing, and the forwarding of this field has been incredible. But there is now a need for balancing the forwards motion with the kind of community building, which is what I think women can do so well. And I think that, you're talking about your network of the people that you've trained, the people that sense of family and community. And I think there's something for me about the idea of, like, the masculine that runs forward to get the results and to get it done and to achieve it. And it's brilliant. I mean, we've absolutely needed that so much. And I'm so grateful to my predecessors, the forefathers, in a way, that have struggled, like Robin. Robin worked very, very hard for years, and David Nutt. They worked extremely hard, like in a very, very single point of focus way to get this psychedelic research established the way they have. There's been a real dedication and drive to get that done. And without them, I wouldn't be doing this work at all. So I'm so grateful for that. But I do also think there is something around, the idea of the masculine striving forward to get it done and pursue it and, like, open up new terrain. And there is also something about the building of community and the going slowly and the going carefully, and the idea of family and shared kind of knowledge that is also really important. And that's where the feminine can balance the masculine, I think. Yeah. So
I mean, thank you for saying that. Yeah, I am so grateful, to all these people who've come before us and held this, 1 point vision, like the Stephen Ross, Jeff Gus, the Charlie Groff, the work, all this wonderful, Roland Griffiths, all this. So, I'm, maybe it took that kind of determination, in the scientific field to move forward because, like that. And what's really catching my attention also, and I don't, it's not me, it's not for me or about me, but it's really the first time medical doctors are reaching out to someone like me, who represents a very different angle. It's really the first time in the research field that they include and seek and want that bridge with the tradition. And so I find the gravitas of that moment really interesting, because this can open a lot of different channels, for the future. So, I'm thanking you, the women, who started this, this field, because you must have gone through, the ringers, and then now they, that the physicians would reach out to me, and another group of physicians in DC, in Washington DC, is also reaching out for consulting and advising from me. So, it's opening, and I'm really glad that they realize that there is benefit in that, and there is support in that, and there is wholeness in that. That's the wholeness. They realize that they have to include the bigger picture. Somehow it comes to them that they have to do it, or it's the research is more potent that way and more cared for, right? So it's a good sign. It's a good sign that someone like me would be invited. I'm really watching that happen. Really. So James, you had a comment question you wanted?
Yeah, I do have this question, and it is specific about the topic of psilocybin for grief coming up, and sort of like the maybe trying to find the common denominator in some sense of what's happening with psilocybin that leads to some sort of, we'll just say, healing response, be it depression, grief, dying, and so what I'm curious about is where you see grief and grieving as a role, or where you see it inside of, oh my God, let me try this question again. What role do you see grief and grieving in the larger healing process with psilocybin?
Just thinking that there's always, I think there's always grief in there. It's interesting. It's an interesting kind of way of thinking about it, because if there isn't grief in the, from what I've seen with our participants with depression, there's grief for what's been lost, and grief for the traumatic experiences, but often actually as well, like when people feel a huge benefit from the psilocybin, even if there hasn't been grief so much in the actual session, there can be grief afterwards because of so much time of life that was lost because of depression. So even sometimes feeling that sense of connection and joy, there can be grief coupled with that too, because it's often coming very late in life and there's a sense of real regret. And then of course grief coming back when the depression comes back, because one of the things I really want to talk to you, Francoise, about is, what we've really experienced is that the depression does come back. It comes back for pretty much everybody. And there is a lot of grief when the depression returns, because they've seen what it's like and felt what it's like to not have the depression, and then it slowly starts to come back again. So yeah, that's my little overview of grief. But I think, Francoise, you probably know, you have a lot more to say about this because you've been working in this for so much longer than me, and with so many different varieties of people. So I'd love to know what you think about.
Well, I agree with you, and I'd love to talk to you more about the fact that the depression returns, or what happens in that process. That's another discussion. Okay, that's a very big theme to explore. On the grief theme, I think that what scares us the most as human beings is death, is the end of things. It can be, the death of a relationship or the death of a loved one in real flesh and bone, the death of a job, the death of a friendship, the death of living in a place, and having to move, the death of a residential place that has held so much memory or whatever. The letting go, the moving on, the surrender, moving forward and letting go of things. This grief process, which can be, of course, the death of someone, physical death, but also in this case, that's what I'm looking at in the research. But that letting go and dying is a process that happens in many different levels. And I think that in psilocybin, in mushroom work, this gets addressed, or I don't know if treated, I don't like to call it treatment, but like it gets addressed because in mushroom experience, we get to feel the eternity of things. We get to feel that things don't really end. They end on a certain level, but not on another. Someone dies physically, but the spirit remains. Or a job is gone, but then we harvest all the beautiful things we learn in ourselves, skills and empowerment along the way of that job. So we move forward. There's a kind of an acknowledgement of what has been, and then a moving forward for the next phase. So there is a reconciliation of the dying process that I've seen. I've worked with people, over the years. Many people have come with me to Mexico who have lost people, right? Lost a parent, lost a child, lost a partner, lost a friend, through disease or accidents. And invariably, what they came out with was the fact that they had connected with that person, and they had felt like they were complete with their life and they were moving on, and they didn't have to feel a sense of loyalty by hanging on to the memory and the pain of it in order to feel connected, that they could honor the spirit of the person and move on with their own vitality, which was a great celebration of this people's life, really. So there was this completion process and this letting go of that burden while celebrating life that was here now. And I've seen that over and over again. I mean, parents coming to me like, I need to do that trip with you because my son died 15 years ago and I'm crippled. And I would take them and we would do the work, and or they would do the journey and come out with like 85% alleviation of, this debilitating feeling. So it was very rewarding. And I agree with you. So I think that, so to finish that, I feel like the process of grief is really well addressed in the mushroom medicine, because the mushroom itself has I've talked about that sometime, has the propensity of teaching about impermanence, how, the mushroom is a very impermanent being. And so it comes and it goes and, like that. It has a fundamental mycelial body. The mushroom itself is very impermanent, and it teaches that, you come, you go, you're here, you go, things happen, things finish. And so we absorb that when we take mushrooms, I believe, or the psilocybin. And so we absorb that principle, that sense of impermanence. And we okay with that. We learn about it. We land into it. We rest into it, and we understand it intrinsically in our experience. The idea, and this, it's interesting because this woman I was just mentioning who had the son who had died 15 years ago recently contacted me and wants to go back on a trip with me because she felt like she had another layer of grief that was there. So that connects with what you're saying about how things returned. And so I asked her, I said, considering where you were before the first journey, which was like a year and a half or 2 years ago, and she said, oh, yeah, no, it's 85% better. But now that I'm in this different zone, I recognize that I could even here alleviate some of that leftover burden, that it feels like a burden. It doesn't feel like just a good memory of my son. And so I said, okay, so we will go again and we will travel there, and when it's possible, and we will continue. Um, but I'm curious about your process or your format in the research of how do you guys do the support system after the depression trial is done, as far as the integration and solidifying the benefit of those treatments. So I'm curious about that. That feels like an important thing.
It has been, yeah, thank you. That was really interesting to hear you talk about that grieving process. And yeah, the working with people who've lost someone and how powerful that can be, because that has been, of course, many of the participants have had that experience too. But your question about the integration, I'd say that has been the thing that I have probably focused most of my energy around constructing, because in the scientific protocols, there isn't much space for that for a number of reasons. One is because in a scientific study, you're just looking at what the psilocybin is doing, not psilocybin plus therapy, because then it starts to become quite complicated in terms of what's doing what. So in our most recent study, we compared psilocybin with an SSRI escitalopram. So it was a kind of the model was quite minimal. I'd say really the bare minimum of what is safe and ethical to give in terms of psychological preparation, support during the session itself, and integration. And during the study itself, for the 6 weeks, there's a 6-week follow-up period until we get our final data point. So they have a psilocybin session, then they have 3 weeks wait, they have another psilocybin session, and then 3 weeks after that, so 6 weeks after the first psilocybin session, it's our final data point. So that's when we get our kind of proper data. And so to kind of leave that data, like, I guess, uncontaminated, we can't give too much. People can't do too many different things in that period of time. But we give a certain amount of support, and obviously they have contact with their therapist, their guides, mainly through Skype, but a small number of sessions. And then as soon as that 6-week period ends, that's where we've really built an integration program. And the interesting thing about that is none of it's going into the results, none of it's going into the research write-ups, because it's all just after they finish the study. But it's been, for me, where the real work has been, because it's having that contact with people beyond the study and keeping in close contact with them and knowing what's happening, what's changing. So the first thing we did, based on the first study, the first psilocybin for depression study, Michelle Baker-Jones, who was the other therapist in the first study, one of the other therapists in the first study, we set up a psychedelic integration meetup group in preparation for the study, so that people that had been in the study, their depression had gone, and then their depression came back, so they're left with this experience of, wow, there is something that can really help me, but I can't access it again, and no one that I know has experienced it, and I keep wanting to talk about it and be around other people that know about it, but there's no way that I can. So we set up this psychedelic integration group where people can come and talk together to integrate psychedelic experiences, even if they happened a long time ago. So that was the first thing. The second thing is that we recruited to our team a meditation teacher to be the aftercare support person. So my colleague Ashley joined the team, and she people could have unlimited meditation support with her, because we think meditation is a great way of maintaining that kind of openness that you can get from psilocybin. So we had equally across both groups, the SSRI group and the psilocybin group, people from both groups used Ashley's services quite a lot, and she helped a lot of people develop a meditation practice. And then the third thing we've done, which I probably it's been the most mind-blowing thing for me in terms of being surprised by how effective something is since discovering psychedelics as a psychologist, since recognizing the power of psilocybin. The second most surprising thing I've discovered is the power of group Zoom calls, because obviously with COVID, everything's going to Zoom. So for our psilocybin participants, a number of them, they just done their psilocybin sessions in the study, and then COVID happened and lockdown happened, so they couldn't access integration sessions, they couldn't go to integration groups. They'd have these huge expansive experiences, and then they're kind of left on their own, some of them living on their own. So what we developed is a Zoom group for all the people in our study that have done high dose psilocybin in the study. So it's 30 of them, because it was 30 on psilocybin, 30 with the SSRIs. And we're doing these weekly Zoom calls just for them to integrate and share. And the power of these groups has been, I've learned so much from the participants. They support each other in such a beautiful way that I feel like I want to send a letter to every research group saying, when you finish the study, please set up a Zoom group for all your participants, because they've all got so much out of it. And the facilitators have learned so much too. So meditation, Zoom group, and meetup group as well are the main things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm hearing that, and I imagine that we'll have a similar template and format to your study, because you've done it, it's true and safe and it's working, and we can copy you, of course. So we'll have a similar thing. We were just talking about how many weeks between the journeys. So you had 3 weeks between the journeys. 3 weeks.
3 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, we were thinking of doing a longer delay, but you're right. I think that because we cannot do a lot of support in between, or to not contaminate the study, so to speak, I think we might consider doing things faster. Like not wait. We were thinking 6 weeks between the two journeys, but maybe 3 weeks is better, because 6 weeks, things come and go. It's too much flux. So maybe we'll talk to you more about that and consult with you about that possibly.
I'm going 3 weeks as well, actually, in a weird way, because the first study was 1 week and the second study was 3 weeks, and I think 2 weeks might have been better than 3 weeks. But James, what do you think? You must have what do you think? 2 weeks or 3 weeks between?
I mean, I think it would depend on what the I would say, I'm not a scientist, so I wouldn't be thinking about setting up scientific protocols for research. I would just think about what that person specifically needs and what their life context is and what it is they're trying to address. Somebody with a very busy life might not be able to be fitting in a journey every 2 weeks, where some people can smoothly enter in and out every 2 weeks, and then other people might need more time to make sense of it. Maybe it's more of a month. Although I think, and I mean, leaning into, I think it was Frederick Barrett, his work around the neurological changes that are left over from psilocybin lasting up to a month or so, that I would think that if you're looking to do a series of journeys that connect in a larger arc in your life, that you would want to do them within sort of the time frame that the psilocybin is still with you on a neurological level, which I would say would be within a month. And then my personal experience, when I was doing a lot of sort of a longer term deep process, I would do it every full moon, which isn't necessarily that it needs to be on the full moon to do the healing, but it was a way in which, I mean, in hindsight now, I was in that 31 days. I didn't know that when I was doing this, 7 years ago. But it sort of kept me and my process, not only about me and my process in my life, but it also connected me with a larger natural process, something that was larger than me, which is the cycle of the moon. So I think if we're going to really expand it out and not have the limitations of research, I would say that it would be contextual to the person's life, but it would also be something that was situated in something grander than themselves in their own world, where they would sort of have to be practicing moving their life around to compensate for the journeys as much as the journeys are kind of pushing them to change the way they show up in their life.
I find, thank you for that. I find that effectively the psilocybin remains, or the landing from a psilocybin journey really lasts a good week before they can reorient and realize what has happened and how do they feel and how do they collect their own, harvesting their own results, their own personal state of change, what has changed. A lot of people, they feel something immediately after, the day after, but it takes a week for things to stabilize. And so I'm curious, a week later or 2 weeks, I'm leaning more towards the 3 weeks to a month, just to kind of glean the benefit of the effect that this journey has had, just for the participant to collect it, even though we don't mess with it, we don't contaminate, but for them and for us to read what has happened, and do we have similar readings in different patients, is there a commonality of results in the weeks in between the journeys? So that's interesting to me too. Does someone feel more contemplative? Does someone feel more emotionally uplifted, or does someone feel more sad because there's more sadness that pours out, from the grief place. Grieving happens afterwards, actually. So I'm interested in the different situations, that show up for people. And I wonder if that could be, in what way that could be part of the study, in a way, the effectiveness of psilocybin, and how do we measure that? What are the measuring factors? So I'm curious about that, Rose.
Yes. Yeah, oh my goodness me, I'm just thinking about all the questionnaires we gave people in our study. After every point of contact, they would have these long questionnaires to do. But actually, people really didn't mind. So I think they quite enjoyed filling them all out and kind of missed them when they were gone. So yeah, the data that you capture is so key, because just including one measure or not including it can lead to these amazing outcomes. So yeah, measure everything, measure it all.
I'll pick your brain on that, because I wonder from a, in between the journeys, after the journeys too, as long as we are in the research, of course, we need to be tidy, and afterwards we can be more, whatever, adaptable and improvising. But within the study, I'm really curious, what can we gather that would be not just evocative of certain state, like an additional therapeutic input, but more like a gathering of results, So I'm interested in this, and I think that, that's scientific, but that's also like, human interest, how do you feel about your life since the journey, that's, the results are, in how people feel, right? The measured result is someone feeling better, yes or no? That's the result. And to measure a human experience by someone telling you how they feel is a scientific measurement, which is very subjective when you think of it, right? You measure people saying, I'm happier and I'm not happier. Wow, that's the variables are infinite there, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's scientific and it's not. It's totally not scientific.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I think in a way, like the behavioral changes, behavioral outcomes, I think feel very, very rich. Just in terms of, what people do with their lives afterwards, like the proof is in the pudding kind of thing. And I think that's why the Zoom group has been so amazing, because, I've been able to sit there every week and observe this group of people who, I met before they had the psilocybin experience, and the way they would interact with me, with other people, and with themselves, and then seeing the way they're interacting with each other now. The wisdom, compassion, openness, willingness to express vulnerability, support vulnerability, articulateness, creativity, new projects, all of that, it's like the behavioral changes are, you can see that. You can see there's a shift, there's a change, a physical change that's very palpable. And the other thing actually that I always wanted to measure, but we never have so far, is heart rate variability. So I think that's one thing that is a bit more a kind of objective, and I think that would be a really interesting thing to include, just because of the lots of meditation studies include it. I think you just get a simple monitor. So I think maybe some psychedelic studies do, but that would be a really great addition, I think.
So what do you feel about this return of depression, and what do you do? How big the depression is returning? Is it like the same? It's like this woman, her grief crippling situation, returned or became more aware to her perception, but it was less. So I'm just wondering what are the returns from you?
Yeah. So again, from the Zoom group. So this is a group of people. Some of them had psilocybin a year ago, some 6 months, some a couple of months ago, 3 months ago. And listening to their conversations with each other, I would say that for most of them, apart from the very recent ones that had it a few months ago, the depression has returned. But it is subtly different. So that before they would have said, I am depressed, I am a depressed person. Now they would say, I am a person with a depressed part, and that depressed part has returned, and I can feel the depression in me, but I am bigger than the depression, and I can feel it come and go, and I can hold it, and I can sit with it and I can be kind to it. So it's a different, the depression is back, but it's a different relationship with the depression. It's not being consumed by it, but it is very much there. And so, and what's, I guess, I feel like I really always want to talk about that now, just because the media headlines was very much after our first study, you know, my brain has been reset, I have been defragged, and lots of the stories of people for whom, you know, seem to be depression free for a long time. I think actually, you know, the idea for our participants that when they come in, the idea that they should be better forever or for at least like years after one session can make them feel that they failed when the depression does come back, even though they have a different relationship with it. When it comes, they feel it back again. So I feel now it's important for me, certainly from when working with people with depression, to say, you know, don't, you know, this is the beginning of a journey rather than this is a treatment that's going to really, you know, just because I don't want them to feel that they failed when it does come back, because it usually does.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you feel that the support system that you beautifully established with the meditation and the Zoom call, do you feel that sort of, I don't know how to say, continues to make them feel less identified with the depression and more, you know, this is a part of me, but there's more to me, and like tools and skills to actually kind of ride the wave, or having different tools even, or different techniques to quote unquote treat themselves?
I feel like it's almost, what's a good, it almost feels like they're kind of, they're holding on to something, that they're almost like, they're trying really hard to hold on to something that felt so good and strong, and they felt so connected, and they felt this connection with other people, and they're kind of starting to feel like they're falling off the edge, and that the depression is getting stronger and stronger. And they're holding on. So every time they have a Zoom call, or every time they remember to listen to the playlist, because that's the other thing we do, we send people the playlist and they listen to it as a meditation, or they have a meditation session, or they do something that feels in line with their values. They're kind of holding on to this other way, but the temptations of the old way are always there. So numbing, avoiding, kind of blocking out, isolation. And they talk about, you know, when on the difficult days, kind of wanting to go back to just shutting the door and saying, I give up, you know, I give up, this is too hard. But something inside them saying like, no, you know, keep engaging with life, because the kind of motto of our study was accept and connect. So it's that thing of like, accept, this is dark and it feels painful and it feels horrible and I hate myself right now. Accept the feeling, sit with it, and then connect, go out there, like, you know, do something to continue to engage with life. So they're trying to accept and connect. They're doing everything they can, but really what they say is that they're just wanting another session. They just want another session so badly, because, you know, the acceptance and the connection is just so powerful, and that it's hard for them to do it on their own.
Do you find, so I have two questions. Do you find that it might be an interesting follow-up to have these people, again, measured from where they start now, and do one additional psilocybin session as a different research of actually, you know, complete that process, or the value of maybe setting up a research around a second round? So that's one question, of course, maybe not, but the question I have is, do you find that the people who are depressed in your study have had also trauma history that they need to process deeply in a more like a trauma specialized therapy?
Two amazing questions. The answer to the first one is, oh my goodness me, we would all love to do that study so much. I mean, I know that, you know, Robin would love to be able to do that, you know, if it was possible, but funding is such an, you know, like it's just been so difficult to yeah, we would love to do that study. It would be so fascinating to see the ongoing journey for people, you know, it would be amazing, but it costs huge sums of money. And yeah,
because, you know, that's what Johns Hopkins did, right? Johns Hopkins, they did that study, and then a year later they did well, they didn't do another study. They just, I don't know what they did. They just did an inventory with people about what was the spiritual experience actually continuing to make them happy, and to what extent. Remember? It was this whole thing.
Yeah, we do like a follow-up interview with people after 6 months. So we do like a kind of qualitative interview with people. But yeah, to actually give people another session, I think would be really fascinating. The second question about trauma, just thinking about, more often than not, there has been very clear trauma history. And I know, Francoise, that you're experienced in somatic work. That's been part of your own training, and it's something I very much feel lacking in, actually, because the clinical psychology training that I didn't really cover anything about somatic experiencing or anything with the body, which is, yeah. So my own skills in that area are really, minimal. And I've learned we have an amazing supervisor who is a holotropic breathwork practitioner and trainer and psychiatrist. And so he's really helped our team into understanding at least the basics of trauma processing and how that might play out in the body in a psilocybin session or a breathwork session. But that was actually one of the other things I wanted to ask you about, because I'm very interested in the few people we have where they don't seem to respond to psilocybin, and whether that is this kind of dissociation response to trauma, and what you think about that, and also how you work with people, how you work with the body, like what your kind of go to is like.
Thank you for that question, Rose. It's an important question. In my work, with people, I always explore the presence of trauma before any psychological work. I mean, at the entry of psychological work, this is a massive question for me, because if there is trauma, sexual trauma or surgery trauma or accidents or any kind of shock, it can be an emotional trauma too, like the sudden accident and death of a person. I mean, it's connected to grief, but it's also trauma in a family like that, or in life. Then I want to know those massive events situation, because I want to know how they deal with it, how they processed it, if at all, in therapy, and what kind of therapy they've done. Have they done EMDR? Have they done somatic experiencing? Have they done, brain mapping or whatever, energy therapy there is? Or have they done any release work, any breath work, anything that really opens the body structure to this completion of this trauma, fight or flight or freeze moment. So, I found that in my work with mushrooms, I see that when people have trauma, it's very complicated for them to have a large regular dose of mushrooms, because it's too much. It's too close to recapitulating the overwhelming nature of a traumatic experience. They feel flooded with this adrenaline. They feel flooded with fear, with the letting go, what's happening to them. Something is taking over their body, their system, and they feel overwhelmed and they freeze. And there is a dissociative quality, because they freeze, basically, right? They freeze in the face of overwhelm of the experience of mushroom. So with people like this, I have found more success in very low dose, either microdosing for a while or having journeys. I mean, I've been so many times in Mexico with people who have taken like a gram of mushroom, of the equivalent. There we have them fresh, so it's a different thing. But very low dose, where I can be with them and I can talk to them and I can hold them, or I can work on their body, or I can assist and accompany them as they are slowly and safely opening their body to the sensation and feelings and emotions that the trauma holds in the physical self. So that's the way I've been addressing trauma in that way, because I feel this is the most prudent and the most effective. And once they have, done the shaking, the trembling, the breathing, the being held, the being grounded, breathing, looking at my eyes and being in with me during that process, their body is less pent up with that charge, and they can repeat the experience. And when I go to Mexico, we have 3 journeys in a week, every other day.
Mm.
So there's a lot of, front loading, as we call it, of mushroom healing that happens. And so, in the next journey, they do that again. And maybe on the 3rd journey, they do something a little bigger. So they now are more capable. Now, we don't have enough time in between. And some people come back with me, 6 months later or 3 months later, they come back so they can continue this work. And of course, with the integration in between. But even for some people in a week, they get to do that because in a way, their psyche and their body memory understands that they're going to be in a vortex of transformation, during that week. So in that context, and so they're ready and they are absorbing the healing in a good way. And of course, there's a lot of discussion and a lot of integration in between, even during that week. It's very tight regimen of support, right? So very, very light dose of mushroom seem to address trauma well and empower people to stay with the sensation and be accompanied rather than dissociate. So I've seen that too. You're right. There is a dissociation for people with intense trauma that hasn't been addressed. The other thing is, when people want to do larger doses of mushroom, then I say, well, then you have to go to a trauma specialist and really do address this trauma in a physical way. So you will be able to have that experience without dissociating, because otherwise, most likely you will be overwhelmed and it's not really fruitful.
Interesting. Yeah, and that's the kind of amazing flexibility you have with the kind of way you work, where you can explore those things. Whereas, with research, with the protocols, it doesn't really scope for that. So it's very interesting. I wonder whether in the protocols of the future, or even in the kind of medicalized psychedelic therapy kind of westernized models, that we will start off with a smaller dose and build up. It does seem to make sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's almost like I know we hear something grinding still, okay, a little bit. I think that there is a merit. I don't know exactly. I don't want to be like starting new research, but there is merit in studying psilocybin low dose for trauma treatment. Totally, because it's so embodying, and I think that it's actually it has different but as valuable merit as MDMA for trauma treatment, PTSD treatment. Different, very different, but nevertheless very, very, very valuable qualities. And it's an interesting direction for research because MDMA has other aspect to it with the amphetamine in it that is also a different ingredient that can be challenging to some people, where psilocybin doesn't. So
very interesting. I have thought that before, actually. Also because of I suppose with MDMA there's kind of a limited number of time, that I think in a way the safety profile of psilocybin might be a little bit preferable.
Yes.
So and also because I always wonder with MDMA that when it kind of rolls out, whether any people will report the kind of like feeling a little bit depressed a few days afterwards, because I know the research so far hasn't shown that, but that's so much kind of been, I guess it's a concern, isn't it? And so I have wondered whether low dose mushroom therapy, low dose psilocybin sessions could almost replicate the MDMA for trauma model, MDMA for PTSD, but without any of those potential.
Right. I mean, we all know, of course, we are very aware of the effect of MDMA on the amygdala, and there is a very specific physiological impact that we can deny that psilocybin does not provide. But I think that being very honored and respected, there is a different, like you said, there's a different safety profile, and there's a different aftermath that is much more tolerated in psilocybin and mushroom work that would, be very interesting for trauma, for PTSD, that people don't have the risk of being depressed afterwards. I'm not quite sure. I should talk to their team about that piece, to see how they find that being, how important is that post journey effect impacting the people or not? Or I mean, I think that even if they feel depressed a little bit after, I don't think they give them any 5-HTP or anything like this, but I don't think they mess with contaminating the study. But I wonder how the depression that they may feel is still okay in the face of alleviating the PTSD in such a massive way. So I think they take that as part of I imagine they take that as part of the study.
Well, I think from what I've heard, in the studies, they're not finding any kind of like come down, any kind of depression a few days afterwards. They're just not finding that. But I wonder I think there will be many things that when these treatments are rolled out on a massive scale, we'll see different things than we saw in studies. So, the studies are done on a really small sample. So, I'm always reminded of that. Like, when, I talk about the results from our tiny sample, and there's when it becomes a kind of mainstream wide scale treatment, there are going to be so many more like complications with it, and so many more things that we see like a little inkling of something that might be quite tricky. To do it on a huge scale, and that thing might be blown out and to become a real challenge. So I do think that, as they're so promising, psychedelics hold so much promise, but I sometimes get a bit concerned about the speed with which the mainstreaming is happening, because these little things that maybe are fine when it's done in a research group with people that are really dedicated and they've been doing it for a long time and they've got resources and support, and maybe that you don't see these negative things, whether it be a come down after MDMA or whether it be, whatever kind of other complications might arise, but that maybe we will see those things happening more and more. And we might look back and think, we were a little bit optimistic in how naturally benign or naturally like safe or naturally kind of reliable these substances are. I think they might be a little bit trickier than we think. I don't know. What do you think about that? Is that me being overly pessimistic and
no?
Anxious?
This is for a question back to you. I imagine, not in that world, but I imagine that in the world of research, the participants are very carefully chosen for their profile and their psychological solidity, or the support system that they have around, or if they have trauma or not trauma, or if they have, I imagine you have a certain group of people that is selected for the study, just like the MDMA study is for its MAPS, right? I mean, they have, they try to not take people who are too complicated, because the study will not be, positive, will not come out very fruitful, very successful. So I'm sure that there is a screening of participants. And so consequently, the study looks successful, but as you said, the dispatching of those medication, right, or treatment form in the large population might not select the people so with so much carefulness, and so then people will have those treatments and will have all kinds of complicated prior situation, that will not be considered in the treatment, right? And so that might lead to more complication. I agree. I think it's going to be more complicated than it is highly successful. I think it's going to be good. It's going to be better to have more people with less PTSD, for example, with MAPS, or more people with less depression with the psilocybin research, or with grief and everything. So, it's going to be better than not, but there's going to be a lot of nuance and complication that will show up later on, I think.
Yeah.
And hopefully there will be interest in studying that and accompanying those treatments with caution and cautionary advice, also different kind of support with it, or different narrative with it, so the people prescribing those medication or those pills will have an education around what would be the optimal context for those treatments. So people are empowered to actually do something for themselves, just not taking the pill. We were talking about how when people have access to this treatment in a large scale, how how pessimistic or optimistic are we towards the way
and
it's done?
Yeah, the very, very good point you made about the how we screen. And I just was thinking that we have thousands of people apply to be in our studies, and we screen so many. And we said no to a lot of people. We did very carefully recruit our study sample. So that is a really important thing to consider, and mainly because you have such a short time to build the trust. In the research protocol as we had it, the trust building was so brief that we were looking for, in a way, I think it was kind of like agreeableness and conscientiousness. I think it kind of came down to that, and kind of like open, kind of already like a sense of openness, that we could work with people that were going to be able to trust us quite quickly, and we're going to kind of roll with it, roll with something that can be quite a jagged process, and trust us, and actually, use the opportunity to kind of keep doing the work. So we ended up with really, like, when I think about our study sample, I mean, it's not just that, we obviously said no to lots of really lovely people that just for various different reasons wasn't quite right. But we ended up, with this incredible group of people. When I think about our participants, they're a really amazing group of people. Because they're obviously incredibly courageous, because they're not people that use psychedelics in the past. They're people that their depression has been so severe and they haven't found any other treatments. But it's quite courageous to take part in this, study using psilocybin. It's still very new and niche, and so they're very brave, and they're also they're taking part in a study where they might not be getting psilocybin, high dose psilocybin. So they're doing, because in lots of studies, no matter what condition you're in, you get psilocybin afterwards. Like, everybody gets to have a proper psilocybin journey. But in our study, it wasn't. It was like, you might be lucky to get it and you might not. 50-50 chance. So everybody we recruited, one other thing they had in common was this amazing, like, kind of wanting to be of service to other people, wanting to take part, even if they didn't themselves benefit. So I think our group are particularly kind of, they're pretty amazing human beings, really. So, and I think we said no to like 10 people for every one person we said yes to. Right. So it's huge, like, bias, actually, that often doesn't get discussed.
And the people, so then when they never got a psilocybin treatment, essentially. And even after the study was closed, you didn't offer one treatment?
No.
We're wondering about that. We're wondering about that with my LA team, how to do that. I mean, clearly we should not give, if they're going to do placebo niacin, they should get niacin, during the entire study, not on the second one. They were thinking of doing that on the second treatment, and I said, I don't think so. I think you want to keep the study really tidy if you want, trustworthy results. But afterwards, would we then offer, as part of the contract with them, would we then offer psilocybin experience, just because, I mean, people with depression and people with grief have lost people. And I mean, this is hard, ethically, to not give them anything.
Very hard. Yes. It was a very difficult ethical decision. And I think it was just because of, funding limitations. It was kind of like, it was just not going to be possible to do it, and to have enough power to answer the scientific question that we were asking. So it was very tough. But I think at the end of it, having sat with so many people that had the disappointment of not having the psilocybin experience, some people had got so much out of the study anyway, that even though they didn't have psilocybin, they still had a very positive experience. But there was so much disappointment, and it was so hard, because obviously if someone goes through the whole process in order to receive this treatment, and then they don't receive the treatment, and then there's nowhere else they can have it because it's illegal. The disappointment was so huge. And sitting with those people, I think all of us, all of the clinicians in the team afterwards, said, I don't think we could ever work on a study again that didn't have everybody being able to access the treatment at some point. It was too much.
I mean, would it be ethical or even legal to possibly send them to the Netherlands or to send them to a ketamine clinic where they could get some help as far as the depression?
Yeah, well, interestingly, so we have links with Synthesis in the Netherlands, and actually one of our previous participants from the last study was actually treated or is in the process of receiving the preparation therapy and will be having treatment for free there, actually, which is amazing. They're offering free treatment for one of our participants. So yes, I think that it's good to have that. I'm very grateful for that link because there is somewhere we can suggest people go and they get, support with accessing that treatment there.
So that's good. You have some possibility of a referral, and
Yeah.
also they can go, maybe I don't know how it is in the UK about the ketamine, but if that's something also available for them to reach out to, that's another. I mean, it's not the same medicine, of course, and anything, but if they're really depressed, maybe that's an option too.
So I have a couple questions I want to throw in here. I'm also going to kill my video so that it's more focused on both of you. My first question is, and I'll save the second one for afterwards. My first question has to do with the role of community in all of this, because obviously the role of psilocybin is strong in getting some sort of healing or transformation, positive life benefit from psilocybin. But I'm thinking in the sense of like, what is the role of community, not only for positive outcome of the work, but also sort of safety profile as well? Like the difference between being in a vacuum and just taking psilocybin by yourself and not talking to anyone in your family or friends about it because it's stigma or whatever, to even being a part of the psilocybin therapy group, but not getting the psilocybin and still seeing benefits. So, I mean, the question here is pretty broad because I want to give a lot of space for you to comment. Essentially, like, what is the role of community inside of really garnering something quite positive out of our psychedelic experiences?
I'm really intrigued, Francoise. How do you, because I guess you work with individuals, how does it work with you? And is there a community? Is there a sense of community?
Sure. So we have a large community of patients, of clients, we call them in our therapy field. And some of them work with me alone during some residential in Mexico. And then some other time I take groups. So there's a different formula of, how the work takes place. I find that people have an amazing healing support and healing and then struggle support, almost like you said, right? In your Zoom call, same thing. They resonate with other people who are going through the ordeal. Sometimes, the mushroom experience is really uplifting and great spiritual dimension, and they can talk to other people who understand their language and don't find them crazy. So that's great within this group of people. And then there is people who are struggling through experiences, who have a really hard time of resistance or facing, situations in life or whatever. And they can talk to other people about that too. So the fact that they're not crazy or they're not alone or they're not disoriented with their experience, but it's resonant with other people, is a very big part of what the healing is really about. They have their personal situation and predicament that is very unique to them, that nobody matches, of course, but the fact that they have conversation with other people going through it, either in life, I mean, different single people having done this work and we bring them together, or during the experience, also having an experience in group where they feel a sense of solidarity and camaraderie and compassion for each other that then comes to compassion to themselves. So those community moments are essential to the healing. In traditional setting in Mexico, the work happens in community. People come down. I mean, sometime, someone will come to see a healer and do a journey, a ceremony, because they just happen to be alone in the room. But, when Maria Sabina was doing her journeys, or my teacher was doing her journeys, and still, the family is doing the journey, there's generally a group of people coming. Sometimes they know each other and sometimes they don't. I mean, I was there sometimes with a group of like 10 people of my group, you know, and there was 2 or 3 Mexican people arriving from another city, and or people from Argentina or something, and they would join us. And there was like this feeling of, you know, we're here together sharing the same um, human experience, you know, of trying to reach deeper places in ourselves, or more holistic place, or more happy place, or healthy place. So it's not necessarily happy, but, you know, in the journey, but happy place in life. And we're all in there together in this cauldron, you know, cooking our pains and hopes, you know. And so traditionally it's done in groups a lot. And families do the journey in groups there, in families, you know, with the kids and the parents and the grandparents, the aunts and uncles, they're all there together as communities. So it's a shared experience, and I can see why it's important. But you have, even though your participants are doing individual work, the fact that there's a great sense of community in your explanation, right, works a lot for them.
Yes. And I think, I love I think that's the idea of it not, because sometimes I worry about the kind of medical model expansion and the kind of mainstreaming. And I think probably actually hearing you talk about that is probably my main fear about that, or concern about that, is because it loses the community aspect. Because Western medicine, we've lost the aspect of community. So the pharmaceutical model has been about the individual having something wrong with them and receiving a medication for them as an individual because there's something wrong, rather than seeing, you know, the individual and society, community they live in as being, you know, interlinked, and that it's very difficult to treat somebody like as divorced from their community, and that there's so much to be gained from kind of community as an intervention, or community as medicine as well. Right. So it feels very kind of like missing something to divorce these ways of working from community groups. Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether you've heard of it, Francoise, but I don't know if you've ever met or heard from Bennett Zellner. Are you familiar with Bennett Zellner? So he is an economist, and he's developed. James, have you heard of Bennett Zellner?
I have not. No, actually, wait. He focuses on psychedelic communities? I think someone has recently sent me one of his lectures, actually.
Yeah. So it's called the pollination approach, the pollinator model, and essentially, it's looking at ways of. So the pollinator model in ecology, it's this idea that that well-being is dependent on the renewal and the recirculation of resources. So that when a system is renewing and recirculating its resources, that's pollination. That's when things can thrive. And that our systems have got quite kind of cut off in that resources are not being recirculated fairly in our communities. They're all being siphoned off and going to a very, very small proportion of people somewhere else, like the kind of shareholder model. So the pollination approach is where psilocybin treatment centers would be these kind of wellness centers in local communities, and crucially they would be set up by the people in the community, the wisdom holders of that community. Because Bennett makes the point that, you know, every different community has its different socioeconomic profile and its different trauma history and trauma pattern. So different communities, like every community needs a wellness center or a healing place, because, you know, it's just needed, and also a place for gathering and communal togetherness, because we've lost those places too. So the idea is that different communities would build these wellness centers where psilocybin therapy could be offered, but also a range of other activities. But crucially, that in the wake of a psilocybin experience, because people can have that openness, that connection, old patterns can be interrupted, this window of opportunity, that in that window of opportunity at this center, people would be linked in with all the stakeholders in the community, all the different networks. So people with opportunities for jobs and training, social opportunities, and people would get hooked into a network. So it's this idea of, this recirculating, revitalizing resources in a community. And I just think it sounds like the most amazing way for psilocybin to be delivered to people, so that rather than it's coming from a kind of like a kind of corporate giant that has chains everywhere, at these individual centers where the psilocybin can be disseminated and provided in this community by community way.
Mm-hmm. It's very, I love that. And I'm going to look into this guy's narrative because I really love it. I'm involved in the Oregon initiative for the legalization of mushroom in the state of Oregon in the States. And I'm on the organizing board there with Robin with Paul Stamets and David Browner and different people, Graham Boyd and everything. And we are hoping to be able to legalize the mushroom practice in order to have service centers where people could go and receive experiences provided by facilitators well trained, and that's kind of where I'm coming in. And there is Mark Alden, also the MAPS director of Canada, that is part of the group.
Yeah.
So we have a really nice group of people coming from different angles, including Paul Stamets, which is very important for us. And we are trying to establish those centers. Those centers might grow, and actually I'm really happy to move in more of this pollination and impact on the culture and creating more of a social place rather than just going to get a journey, and moving out. There can be more community oriented activity, but this is a great vision. So I'm hoping that this would be the seed of those centers, spread around Oregon, and seeing the treatment available to people who want to not be in a medical model and not be alone doing their thing, but have some facilitation that is educated. So
yes. And would that mean in Oregon that it's possible to have psilocybin sessions that are facilitated in natural settings? Is that happening anywhere?
I don't know. Because of the health ministry regulation, we might have to have some the facilitation center, the service centers might need to have proximity to hospital, like that. So I'm not entirely sure of the regulation from the health ministry. That would be great. That would be fantastic if that could happen in natural environment. But it depends if there's a doctor on site with the right equipment. If there is a doctor on site with the right, whatever machine or the right, the right equipment that guarantees safety, that might be possible. I don't see why not.
What do you think about that? I mean,
I think it's great.
Have you been able to do that ever? Have you ever been able to use like natural settings for?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. In Mexico, yeah. I do that. I know to be in nature, and I remember my teacher. She used to send me off. To this place in the field, where she had a little hut so I could be indoor, during the night for safety. But she wanted me to be outdoor in the mountain alone with the elements, to really be initiated to the power of the mountain and the power of the spirits of the mountain, because there's a whole cosmology there about spirits of the place that have to instruct me as a healer. And so I've done a lot of journeys outdoor there.
Yeah. Wow.
That was part of my my homework, so to speak, to be out there in nature and really be taught by the elements.
Yeah. A colleague of mine is I'm co-authoring a paper with him about the call for considering natural settings for psilocybin work, just because he's an ecologist and he looks at the benefits to well-being of being in nature connectedness. And it seems like nature and psychedelics are kind of working in a similar way, that they're both, the mechanisms seem to be quite similar, to kind of awe and openness and sense of something much larger than yourself, and appreciation of beauty, and ego dissolution as well, connectedness. So I guess we're kind of hoping that that we could, because I also think it's very reassuring and calming for people, and people get so anxious at the beginning of the psilocybin sessions, understandably. Such a scary thing to be doing for so many of them, that I think somehow using nature, even if it's for the preparation and the integration, or for the actual experience itself can be so soothing, that sense of, you know, I'm just part of this interconnected web. Yes. And it's all going on without me. And the like you say, you know, grief and loss and fear of death, you know, in nature, that sense that there's this continual cycle of death and decay and regeneration and death and regeneration. I think it's an amazing thing. So I hope that we can work in that way.
I totally agree. And then there is this, the cycle of life and death is very like present in nature, right? Clearly, this is all there is. And then we become one with it. We are nature, you know, it's not just having a relationship with an external element, but we really feel made of the same blood and flesh. And then there is this thing about the fact that, you know, I mean, I think it has been studied medically that being in nature actually lowers our blood pressure, you know, lowers our anxiety. I mean, there's all kinds of benefits just by virtue of being soothed by the rhythm of nature and the solidity of trees and the slowness of the pace. And, you know, there's something very physiological that happens to our bodies when we're in nature, which, you know, it's amazing because that's just quite a context for a psilocybin experience. Right? To be in an environment where already your physical body is less anxious, is less agitated by virtue of being in the vibration of nature.
Yes.
And then do the psilocybin from there, or the mushroom from there. And
And also this particular moment we find ourselves in, you know, I more and more have come to, you know, see that, you know, we know obviously like set and setting is so important, but really just understanding that, you know, psychedelics are amplifiers, and that, you know, non-specific amplifiers, and that the setting that we kind of create for them, the outcomes are directly linked to that. And that actually in this moment we find ourselves in, where probably the most, I mean, right now COVID feels like it's, you know, the most pressing thing, but actually the most pressing thing is, you know, ecological impending ecological, like, this is a taste actually, isn't it? Because COVID is a taste of like how very rapidly things can change, and our lives can change very rapidly in ways we've never imagined. So I wonder if actually using psychedelics in natural settings and with the nature connectedness is a very specific part of the mechanism, would help people, would help with symptoms of depression and anxiety, would help with all of the things that they do in the hospital setting, plus the added layer of giving people this sense of love of nature, and like you say, Francoise, of being nature. And then not only does that give them a resource for integration, because if they've had that experience of like, wow, I am nature, nature is me, then they can continue to integrate that experience by going out into nature, and that's like a tool that they have for free at their fingertips. And then not only does it give them an integration tool, but it also potentially might lead to more pro-environmental behaviors, which might have a huge impact. So I think the sooner, like I hope we can have some research soon looking at this question of whether doing psilocybin in a natural environment is not only safe, but also, you know, could have huge benefits beyond the ones that we're seeing in the hospital setting.
You know, it's interesting because what I'm sensing right now, at least in the United States here, is the broadening of the decriminalized nature movement, which gives people essentially, I don't know if the right, but the access to mushroom or other plant medicine to use as they see fit. And a lot of people want to take those natural plants. You know, decriminalized nature is exactly that. You know, nature is not a crime to be in nature and consume nature, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of grassroots movement also to claim and reclaim the right to have a relationship with nature and her, you know, magical children of medicine plants, to commune like this, to commune with nature, and not consider her criminalized. And I think that that movement of grassroots is really essential because, you know, yes, we want to continue the research and we want to find a scientific value to the use of psilocybin in nature. I agree, and this is a worth project. And if that can be proven in a medical way, okay. But I think that also there is this, like I said, this grassroots movement who doesn't wait for the medical system to prove anything, and just say, I'm going to take my mushroom in nature, and we're going to be so many of us that it's going to start to be a voice in and of itself. And we're not going to wait for the medical thing to approve of it. In fact, we start to decriminalize it. So even the law cannot put us in jail for it.
Yeah.
So I think that there is also this dimension or this momentum of grassroots reclaiming of nature and how we decide to consume it. Now, I'm all for education, and I'm all for safety, and I'm all for cautiousness, and I'm all for psychological, awareness as far as, what do we take 5 grams of mushroom alone in the forest and get disoriented and unsafe? No, but to create more dialogue around the way this would become is important to me. And I agree that we have to move forward and in preserving the ecological, health of this planet. So I see that the research is really valid, and that's a great avenue. And I'll see also the grassroots and the destigmatization of medicine, natural medicine, as part of what the population is simply reclaiming.
Yeah, no, that's exciting to think about that. Yeah, really. Oh. Yeah, things are moving fast, aren't they? Incredible.
Yeah.
Sorry to jump in here. You can't see me, so I can't flag your attention. Coming in on the last 18-ish minutes we've got left here in our scheduled time. I'm going to ask a final question. In fact, before, we had been in dialogue over email about what we were going to talk about and some of the ideas, and there was throwing some stuff around, and I actually ended up sending out a private message to several people I know who are either underground facilitators or other ground facilitators that aren't necessarily in research, asking them, what question would you like to hear these women talk about? And oddly enough, pretty much all of the questions naturally came up in the dynamic so far, except one question, which I'd really like to bring into the end, which I think is sort of tangentially related to what we're talking about now, insofar as the bringing psychedelics into the modern world as a part of there's a Western culture of use, be it in the medical system or be it because people are like, hey, these are my mushrooms, this is our forest, it's our right to commune, there's no reason to stop us, kind of thing. And it has to do with how these psychedelics are coming in. And of course, research is one of them. But then also with the research comes, Roz, like you said, there's a funding issue, right? And there's only so much money you can extract out of public resource and crowdfunding to get these types of things brought into institution. And furthermore, whether or not they go from the science, from the research lab to, to the institution, really has a lot to do with whether or not money is to be made in, is there financial incentive? Currently, things come into existence in the Western world primarily through financial incentives. So we have the rise of the psychedelic industry, proprietary developments of extraction technologies, or proprietary blends or molecules of psilocybin variants, or whatever it is, people trying to get their foot in, be it Compass Pathways or Usona or any of these other groups that are trying to capitalize on sort of the coming psychedelic boom. And so this question, which I'm just going to read verbatim here, kind of looks at that a bit. And it is, one question I have is how these two respectively feel about the mainstreaming and medicalization of this medicine, the corporatization or appropriation of this ancient medicine into the capitalist agenda. Do they agree that capitalism is the setting for psychedelics? And if so, what safeguards might be put in place that are not used, so that they are not used unwittingly to entrench and perpetuate an economic and political system that increasingly serves the desires or an agenda of an elite class at the expense of the poor and middle class?
That is so beautifully put. Oh, yes. Good question. Beautifully expressed. Oh, I've got so much to say about this, but also Francoise, I could just waffle on about this. But yeah, I
Go ahead, waffle on, waffle on.
I'm scared I'm gonna like my waffling is gonna just erupt and yeah. I worry so much. I'm a worrier by nature. I worry so much about this. Yeah, the sadness of seeing something that felt for me like the potential to change the systems that we're in, and bring about a more sense of connection, a more sense of openness, compassion, fairness. My kind of maybe perhaps naive idea at the beginning of this, when I first became interested in psychedelics and thinking that psychedelics could be a tool to shift our systems, seeing now what is happening is that unfortunately, yes, like I think that they are in many ways, as well as all the wonderful work that's being done to bring them to the mainstream, that there is this thing happening where the justification of there are so many people suffering from depression, we desperately need a mental health treatment, that justification seems to enable the use of these tools to support very different agendas. In fact, an agenda that is itself at the root of psychological suffering. So, I think inequality in our society is a direct contributor to mental distress, and yet we are seeing these kind of if you look at the investment profile of some of these companies, you realize that psychedelics are at risk of being used to just make that system worse, and also to, I guess, being seen as a kind of I think, yeah, that's a kind of tangent that I could go down that route, but I think my main concern, I think, is that there's two concerns. On the one side, on the one end, there is this psychedelic entrepreneurship, where I think we see psychedelics being very much brought into this kind of like wellness, thriving, competition, Western individualism, egoistic kind of I'm so spiritual thing. So there's a conference advertised where you could seek the services of a psychedelic stylist, and this idea that the psychedelic, that they're being kind of co-opted from these real genuine tools of transformation into this kind of like little, oh yeah, I've done ayahuasca lots of times, I'm very, very psychedelic and very spiritual, and actually it's just ego inflation. So I see that, to summarize, I see that I used to think that psychedelics had a real potential for kind of ego dissolution, and actually I realized that they also have a potential for ego strengthening. So that's the one thing, and that the question is about the capitalistic system, and I think that is about ego, and it's about competition, it's about survival of the fittest, it's about doing the best that you can possibly get, and just striving, rather than thinking about the needs of the whole and the community. And so, yes, I think that there is this kind of individualistic, narcissistic quality that can be strengthened as a result of psychedelic use, and we're seeing that in psychedelic entrepreneurship. So that happens on the individual level and on the collective level. And then on the other end, so that's on the kind of psychedelic entrepreneurship end. And on the other end, my concern is that, so you mentioned before, James, when you were giving the list of different kind of emerging, I guess, like companies, you mentioned Usona in there, but actually Usona are not for profit. So they are actually kind of supporting Bennett Zellner's pollinator model. They're looking into it. He's been talking to MAPS and Usona. And so I see this pollinator model as having real hope, because actually they're looking for funding sources that it's not about a few shareholders where their needs will be prioritized over the community. They're looking for ways and new models of financing these centers, so that it'll be much more a sense of community ownership, more of a co-op, I guess. So I do see hope there, but otherwise I see a potential kind of nightmare scenario for me, which is where the Trojan horse of like we are suffering so much, we need these medicines, we need these to be available to everybody. In that Trojan horse come in a few individuals who are going to make a lot of money by providing psychedelic therapy that is profitable. And psychedelic therapy that is profitable for me is kind of psychedelic therapy that is not good enough, because I think it's a very expensive model to do psychedelic therapy properly, to have the amount of therapists you need, the amount of time you need. I don't think it's going to be profitable. If it is profitable, I think it's going to be kind of the corners are going to have been cut too much. So I'm very concerned that there will be this sense of, we need these treatments which will allow these kind of savvy individuals in a very capitalistic system to make a large amount of money based around a psychedelic therapy that bears almost no resemblance to the kind of work that Francoise is doing, or that has been done historically. So I feel like my this has been longer waffle than I thought it would even be, but my answer to that question, that very amazing question, is it's the capitalist system is unfortunately it's not the right setting for this kind of work, and we're seeing it play out now very intensely. And I just really hope that there are models that can provide us with an alternative. And the pollinator model right now is kind of the one that gives me the most hope for change, for even if we can't change the capitalist system using psychedelics, which maybe we can, but even if it's not about that, it's at least that there is some way of these medicines being accessible to people beyond the decriminalization movement, of course, which is another route, whereby it's not going to be a few shareholders who are going to be making huge profits, but in fact it's going to be a community of people working together to just provide a service that is good, rather than it being about making profits. Sorry, that was so long.
No,
that's why I want you to talk, Francoise.
Almost nothing to add. You totally spoke my mind. I love it. So I'm going to add a few things. No, I mean, really, frankly, this is like, not that much to add to that. I totally resonate, so I don't want to reiterate. Historically speaking, white people have gone to indigenous cultures, extracted something, rubber, whatever. They've extracted stuff, took it to the West, and made money out of it. Never went back, never protected the land of the indigenous people, never gave back anything for healthcare, for education, for maintaining the tradition. And that's where things fall short. The fact that we turn to indigenous wisdom for knowledge and product even is valid. I mean, it's okay. We are one big planet and we can learn from each other. So I'm not against that. By principle, what I'm against is the colonialist model, is the white people going to the indigenous people, extracting, utilizing, commodifying the product, and then making like the Trojan horse you're talking about. So my, the truth is, I know these people. I mean, I've seen them, dialogued with them, the Compass people and all that, the investors and all that, right? And I tell them, look, the truth is, you can do your commercialization because you're capitalist and you don't understand what psychedelics are about. You want to make the money. You business people, you venture capitalists, you all in there for making more money. So you do your thing, because capitalist system is not yet obsolete. Apparently it is obsolete, but it's not yet gone. So you do that, which is not at all aligned with the psychedelic principle of solidarity and sharing and equality and being one family. If you want to see your mother die of hunger because you want to make more money, that's the principle you're perpetuating here. And that's okay. If you want to do that, just do it with your eyes open. Just do it with your knowing that you're killing a member of your family. You're letting your child rot because you choose to make money. If you see the family being that way, then you can do that and, carry your karma. As I said, carry your karma, carry your accountability with yourself till the day you die. And if you need to live with that, then that's your choice. But, just know that that's what you're doing, right? And live with it. live with it. I mean, I'm not you to see what your karma should be in this lifetime. If your karma is to break down the family structure of the planet, this is your decision to make, right? And the other thing I said to them is, you do your Kentucky Fried Chicken, you do your McDonald's, you do your Starbucks, you do your thing that's going to be disseminating mediocre treatment, mediocre aspect. You'll make a lot of money, and we will remain the farmers market and the table and the farm to table, and we will remain the people doing the healthy work.
Yeah.
And the voice of this movement will just keep growing with the decriminalization, with initiative with Oregon, with the research that continues happening, with the people taking their voice in consuming and doing community work. And you will remain Kentucky Fried Chicken. Okay?
Yes.
And you will be known as a mediocre, cheap, unhealthy modality, and people will write articles that will make you look like you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And the more the voice of the people with an intelligence about this are valid and expressed, well, you'll keep doing your Kentucky Fried Chicken and you'll make your millions, and that's okay. Make your millions, but there will be another voice existing.
Yes.
We're going to keep doing no matter what you're doing. So you keep doing your work, what you feel is right for you. If you feel this, you want to live with this, that's your choice, and we'll keep doing what we're doing.
I love that analogy. I do love that analogy. And I love it as well because it's kind of containing in the sense of like, let them do their thing. It's not going to, affect what we're doing. But I guess I could use that analogy a bit further. Like, I suppose we know now that Kentucky Fried Chicken is really, really bad for the health of the nation. Yes. But it's never no amount of Kentucky Fried Chicken is going to lead to the shutting down of the farmers market. Whereas with these models, with the kind of, great big compass pathways or whichever, compass pathways, let's just say the name, those kind of models, the potential for something going wrong there could derail, I think, this work for everybody. So, because if it
will.
Yeah.
It will. The lack of caution and the fact that people are training 2 days, and the fact that they're trying to even separate the trick from the molecules, so people the whole things will happen. But that's also it is also true for decriminalization. Things will happen, because people will use the medicine or the substances or the natural medicine without much education or framework. And the more the least regulated something becomes, the more problem there will be. That's just the nature of the game, right?
Yeah. I'm gonna interject an initial concern too, because I Francoise, I love what you're saying here, like as well, Roz. And one possible thing we have, yes, like less regulation means more risk of sort of accident, I guess. But then you have these major companies who, when they screw up the process, it's going to get a lot of attention, hurts the movement. And then we also have the issue of, well, them becoming successful and too much regulation, such as what we've seen with cannabis, especially here in Canada, but in various states across the United States, where the manner in which licenses were given out for people to produce cannabis and sell cannabis selectively manipulated the market to favor towards organizations that had mass amounts of overhead capital in order to establish those licensing. In Canada, the result is most people are like, government weed is bunk. Why would I do that when I can buy weed from this app on my phone and it's delivered by the end of the day and it's grown by somebody in my neighborhood or like in my community, right? Mm-hmm. And we have something like 60% of known sales is still legacy market. Like people are not buying from the government. But we also saw like a lot of individual smaller growers just like basically disappear, like that had been family generations preparing for legalization and they're gone. And similar in the United States, or worse, they fall into needing to make money elsewhere. And now the law is actually harsher on them
as providing a product without a license. There are no drug dealing is one thing, but it's like, well, now you're jeopardizing the profits of the government. That's a whole different thing. We're going to come down harder. So I'm just wondering, I mean, I'm adding my commentary here at the end as we're kind of closing in out, and seeing if there's anything you have to say on this concern about whether or not, big business influence will possibly make the licensing protocols around psychedelic therapy to basically eliminate the capacity for smaller good people doing their work to do their work, and of course harsher penalties coming down on people who are doing it anyways.
Well, I mean, I don't know why when you speak of that, James, it circles back to me to the possible project in Oregon, because that's a kind of an interesting template of what could be and in between, it's not research, but it's not, decrim, and it's like there's a context and there is facilitation and there is safety. And the licenses will be given to some facilitators that will gone through a training to dispense those experiences. And so I think that it's such a fine line between everybody does what they want and they have a freedom, and the decree movement, which I totally support. I'm the first one going to talk to the city councils. I'm there. I'm on their board, and also I'm good with that. But so that end of the spectrum, and the research, which I'm also doing now. I'm doing a research. So everything in between the research and the free consuming and free access everything is valid. I think that what remains for me the main whatever my main focus is education, is wisdom being passed on from people who have been in the field for a long time, and being heard for what they have witnessed, what they have learned, the cautionary tale they can say. So this consuming of mushroom in this case, or any substance, natural substance, or synthesized substance, can be done with some intentions, some honesty, some respect, some reciprocity towards the lineage and the community around. So it's more about narrative and communicating and continuing to share what we're doing today, to dispatch those kinds of narratives so people can be informed. I think the more destigmatization that happens, and the more conversation there are, the more people will find their orientation and their choice and their right in the consuming of psychedelics. These people who are commercializing and commodifying those substances will be making damage for sure. There will be damage, and but I believe, and in my dialogue with them, I see that there is a certain level of awakening. I don't want to say awakening like enlightenment, but sort of a they're starting to see a sliver of the spirituality that's connected with psychedelics as well. And I want to keep nurturing that, because I believe that everybody's a human being and they don't know what they don't know. So part of cultivating the possibility of even high strung investors to see the capacity of psychedelics to unify the planet rather than divide it is something I want to keep forging ahead with.
Yeah, it would be so lovely, wouldn't it, if we could kind of, if there really could be a sense of including all the different voices, all the different stakeholders in this movement forward, because it does seem really sad that there are so many people that have been doing this for a really long time and know so much more. I know so much less about this work than so many people, yet because their work is underground, it's very difficult to include their voices or include their work, and that feels like a real loss. And I wonder whether, I think what we need now, I think what the psychedelic community or the psychedelic research movement need is new structures. We need new structures in place to help us. We need new ethical structures to keep, kind of ethical practice in check, increase transparency, make people accountable. We need structures there. I think we also need structures to bring in the voices of the people that have been doing this for a long time, so that whether they're in a supervisory capacity or as mentors, we need so many mentoring structures, supervision, therapy training. There are so many things we need to build and create. And I think that by building those structures, we can include those voices, because, it just seems so sad to lose out on all that wisdom. So even if there is a system whereby people that have been doing this work underground aren't able to be, I don't know, however it's going to look, but maybe they're not going to be able to be the psychedelic therapist in some ways. But if they could be, if there could be systems and mechanisms and structures so that those people could be the elders, the wise people that hold all this knowledge, like you said, like cautionary tales, and just their experience about, if you do it this way, if you do it that way, if we can learn from them, then they'll have a place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I just hope that we can. But the problem is, of course, that we know that the capitalistic model and the model of the profit making, the for-profit model of about making psychedelic, making psilocybin as a substance at scale and making psilocybin therapy at scale. Of course, in order to make those profits, it's going to cut out all of those structures because they're all going to be so expensive. So I think it comes back to the KFC versus the farmer's market thing, that, in the farmer's market, we can have all of the farmers there with all the different fruits and all the different things. And we can have, the wisdom and expertise of like people that have been doing organic farming for centuries throughout their family, and include all those voices to make our farmers market really, really amazing and delicious and safe and connected in a community. And then people hopefully will just stop eating KFC.
That's right.
Great.
And all the sorry to interrupt you, but all the stakeholders of this work and all the people that have been invested for a long time in training, they will all be welcome in the farmers market. So there will be a place for people.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take this as an opportunity to call this to a close, but maybe I'll just say, like, what I'm gleaning out of this last sort of like 10 minutes seems to really make a call for individuals who want to see farmers markets ensure that they are awake and alert and participating in the grassroots and social movements that will protect those farmers markets from the encroaching KFCs and Walmarts and all the rest. And I also want to thank both of you very much for your time today, and also for your work in this field and your work in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, both of you.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you, James.
It was lovely.
Yes, wonderful spending that time with you. I hope we can continue our dialogue off screen sometime.
Definitely. Lots of love.
I have a lot to learn from you now that I'm getting in that field. So.
Exciting times. Me from you as well. So great. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day, everyone.
Bye-bye.
And cut.
Bye. Bye-bye.
If you like this episode, please share it on social media or off social media if you're trying to do what I'm doing, which is staying off social media, because it's really bad for your brain and your self-worth and your emotional health, because it's a toxic landscape that's basically, forwarded by a profit incentive, which focuses on ensuring that your attention is funneled constantly into the social media network and not actually into things that might benefit your life. So if you're not on social media, share it with a friend some other way. Sharing is the best way to help, the best and easiest way to support the podcast reach. If you're interested in supporting the show financially, which I would very much appreciate, please head to jameswjesso.com/support, Patreon or PayPal. Those are great options. Thank you very much. Links are also in the description to this episode. Alternatively, you could just head over to jameswjesso.com/coffee and buy a bag of Deep Sky coffee. Deep Sky sponsored this episode, and they're awesome. They produce delicious coffee, single origin beans, locally roasted in Tampa, Florida. And when you use the promo code Jesso, they'll give you 10% off your order and send 5% to psychedelic research. So get some delicious coffee, get a discount, support psychedelic research. It's winning all around. So jameswjesso.com/coffee, promo code Jesso. Enjoy. So that's all for this episode. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I will see you on the next one. Take care.